Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about and showing you how to support small little parts, fragile parts, jewelry, cosplay prop parts, things like that, small accessory bits. I'm talking about like tiny little things like little beads or trinkets, things that you would probably take for granted because they're so small. They seem like something that should be relatively easy to support. And yet, at the same time, I get asked this question a lot of how to support these types of objects because of how small they are, in some cases, less than a millimeter thick. They're like little wafers. And unfortunately, what happens is they tend to curve or warp or just deform in other ways, and they just don't look very good. So a lot of people either take to making them a little thicker, scaling them up a bit, or just generally trying to look for supporting techniques that generally will make them look good when they come out so you don't have to mess with them too much or apply too much finishing. So I'm going to show you a couple methods. I'm going to show you the way we supported it for the example I'm showing you here. And then I'm going to give you a couple more examples of how to support that differently, or, just even if we go over the similar method, I'm going to kind of break it down so that way you understand exactly what we did and why it was supported that way. But anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. And this is how it was supported. Now, I'll show you exactly. There's a couple things I probably will change on my next revision because these little micro supports here aren't really necessary. And there's a little bit of finishing required there and also here. And over there as well. So there's 3 zones there that wind up with a little bit of additional finishing. But honestly, I just wanted to avoid. The island catch probably catches islands there, and if so, I think we just need to configure that just a little differently to avoid finishing. The discs, they look crazy because of all the supporting, but there's a lot of islands in here. And essentially, what these are 0.20 millimeter tips with 122 diameter bars, and these actually they look crazy, but all you have to do is just kind of roll the object off those supports. You don't even have to clip them. You can actually just squeeze the tips down and that little puck just falls right off. Looks like it's over supported, but these are pretty small tips right here, so you're not going to have too much issue if you support it like that. This is also orientated for what I considered strange at first, but after looking at it, um, you recognize the fact that really this is the best way to do it. If you do it at any angle, you're going to wind up catching a ton of islands on one of these designs. And doing it straight up and down, obviously, it has its downs, obviously, because you wind up with sagging on these straight parts here that are, parallel. And the only way really to avoid that is just place enough supports here to make sure that there's really no gaps. And there you go. And I'm going to go over kind of how, you can do this if you're starting from scratch as well. So let's go ahead and get rid of those. And we'll pop up these. So I chose this little shape raft with the edge there, the shape wall. And I just did 100%, 200% angle. And those are good because it protects these parts when you go to pop them off with your scraper. And that way you don't damage them or hit them. You got this little wall to bang into. So it's a good one. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick with the same size, 20 and the 120, 122. And then I'm going to go here. And now again, because these are parallel, you want to go ahead and support the perimeter of this. And you want to make sure that you support both sides equally. And then just space this out like that. And then you're going to repeat this process on each one of these little rectangular areas. Like that. Again, just make sure you get as close to the edges as possible. If you don't, put another support or move it, because you really want to make sure you're getting to the edge, because this is a parallel piece. So anything you're not supporting is going to sag. It's going to look awful. So what I usually do is I kind of overlap it so it's a bit on the corner and a bit off the corner like that. You can even, if you wanted to, put an extra support here, but it's not necessary because this bit of material is not that wide. What you could do, however, is you could um, do a little minis like that and kind of give this a little extra support. That is something you could do. That's not too much of an extra task. And then just, that way you have that. Not necessary, like I said. You don't have to do that. You can even do that in between here if you wanted to. Again, probably not that necessary, to be honest, because these aren't that big. And this way you're getting plenty of support coverage anyway. But that's probably a little bit even more excessive than what you need. And yeah, you're probably wondering, what about this centerpiece? Okay, again, we can do a similar technique where instead of doing full supports, you can just do trees. On like that. They don't even have to be that long. And honestly, you could probably just get away with putting one or two supports across the middle, like that. And that's probably the excessive method. You might have to sand that a little bit because of how many little nubs are there. This is your bare minimum right here. This is the bare minimum of how you'd support something like that. That's completely supported, like just absolutely excessively supported, and then you have, you can kind of midway, where you just add a couple. There. And then you make sure that entire piece, now it looks crazy, like it looks like there's a lot of supports there, but these are really small. These are two twos. Actually, wait, we should be using 20s. Hold on, let me change that. There we go. Makes a little bit of a difference. And you can finish up this piece. All right. And again, it doesn't matter if you do it like this with the mini supports or whether you don't. Those mini supports aren't necessary. I'm just giving you an example. If you wanted to give it extra support, if you thought it was necessary, like if you wanted to maybe use an even smaller tip here and use minis to support the rest of it, that's an option. I'm also going to show you in the corners, you can use minis here to help you with these trees as well, or you can use a whole tree set. That way it's a little bit easier to manage. I'll give you that example there. Just finish this piece. And then we're just going to go ahead and put some in Okay. Now that's the bottom parallel pieces there. And then, the ways you could support these arches, it really all depends. You could just do this and support the arch. And that technically would be enough. You could add additional, like, and put a giant tree trunk there. You could also do it this way. That's a little bit easier to manage. And then again, just to demonstrate. Now, by the way, I'm holding Alt and Shift after I place the initial support. That allows me to place these as duplicates along to that branched into the initial part. And that, my friends, is actually all this really needs, aside from a few island catches, which we can check real quick and I'll show you. Now, if you remember our trick, we always check at different layer heights. So we're going to go ahead and check at 20. And then we're going to check at 35. And I do this regardless of the layer height that I'm printing at, just so you know. This is really just a trick that I use. I'm just catching islands that honestly I would probably miss or would have to use another tool like UV tools to catch. And I just rather use this trick, to be honest. So as you can see, we have no islands. We've caught them all. And if we look at this, this will actually populate really well. One of these pieces will be solid right there. Boop. Nice chunks, all very well supported. That's going to draw up. And you're going to have those arches come up. And as the arches come up here, they're going to be supported, but they're also going to kind of be supported by the material next to them. And these are going to come up. And this is just going to build up nice and steady, and boom, done. So this piece is technically done. If you wanted to, you could go inside here and place a couple additional supports. Say like this, just to give you a little bit more added strength as the print gets teeny weeny bit taller. And that way it's on the inside of the print and you won't care. You won't have to finish it, and then you'll be done. Obviously, just don't forget to check your proximity and you're good to go. But that is how you would support this. Now, the reason I say this is incredibly, look at the wall of this material, and then look at my support. Now that's a 1.22 millimeter diameter bar. It's only ever so slightly thinner than the wall of this. So this is just a little thicker than a millimeter. So this is some very thin material, and this is why I say these little parts, these tiny things are very susceptible to breakage. So there you go with that. We can go ahead and get that out of there. Now, little discs or bead caps, they're thinner. I believe they're about a millimeter thick, maybe at their thick parts. Now, these things have a ton of islands on them, and I'll show you what I mean. So we'll go to 20. And the way that you should work on something like this is go ahead and start with the islands. So do it this way, where you go ahead and mark your islands, and go ahead and show them. And of course, they're going to be at the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and put a support tip at each one of these corners. Like that. And always the corners. Always support by the perimeter. That's the best way to do it. Remember that every shape has a perimeter. You use that perimeter to support your object. And there you go. There's your initial set of islands. I actually argue you might be able to print this object like this. but I didn't trust it. And I'm going to show you the minimalistic way to do it. Got no additional islands at 35. And no additional islands there. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to continue around and place an additional support like that. And come around this side. And then we're going to place additional supports next to these other ones here because this is their perimeter, which is the most important part. Okay. And there you go. You could technically print them like this with nothing in the center. Well, really, yeah, I mean, you could. I don't like that because sometimes you wind up getting warping in the middle if it pulls too hard. Depending on the size printer you have, this is possible. So my suggestion to reduce the pulling or sagging is always obviously to just add some additional supports in the middle of your print. And in order to do that, I'm just going to turn contact on, and we're just going to go up like that, up like that. And I'm only really going on the raised areas, not the lowered areas, because those are the areas that would have the most pull. And just do the rest of these arms here. Almost. And then let me turn the supports back on, and there you go. Now, this looks insane when you look at it from that perspective, but I promise you, there's no bracings on here, so these aren't going to be that hard to remove. All you're going to have to do to remove this object is just push it off the supports. Just take your finger and just kind of push like that. It'll just slide right off. But this will ensure that the model has good detail. You're not going to lose any detail because these tips are nice and small. They're not going to embed any damage. One side faces up on this piece, the other side faces down. So technically, this side doesn't matter if this takes a bunch of little support tip damage, which it's not going to, because as I showed you in the example piece, this is pretty much how I supported this, and those pieces came out flawless on both sides. So again, if you're using this tip size and you're not doing any penetration, this looks insane down here, but I promise you it will guarantee that this piece will print flawlessly and look wonderful. Now again, you can just do the minimum and just, you could support your islands, and then you could go ahead and just put your supports around your perimeter. That will technically work. Oh, we got a stray support out there. Look at it. It's a strange one. I haven't tried to print it like this, but I've seen some folks out there who swear that you can print things minimalistically like this with very little support as long as all you do is support the perimeter. Personally, when I've tried to do stuff like that, I usually wind up getting warping in the middle because this center part of the object isn't getting enough support. So I don't know. It's really, kind of take your own risk. Personally, the way I supported it here, I think works just fine. Yes, it's a bit heavy, but no, it's not going to destroy the print when you take it off its supports. Obviously, the other way you can do it is the way that I chose to originally, which is pretty similar. And I'll show you as I printed a bunch of these here. Oh, you go away. There. And you can see it's not as clustered as the one I just showed you. That was an extreme version, as I said. That's a very, very heavily supported object. This is a little bit lighter. This has less support on it, but it still does a bit more than just the basic. And you can even see here in the front, we did some mini supports up there in the front. Like I said, you can do that. This one, like I said, it had mini supports up on the sides. Not necessary, don't need to be there. Like you saw, my new example of that part of the bead, we didn't do that. So, because you don't need to. And we did the island checks on this one, and this one came in fine. So this you could actually print with a little bit less support than I initially showed you. The other one, you could try the perimeter printing. You could try doing very light supporting and just kind of a couple supports in the middle. Or you could do it the way I did it. Or you could do it the extreme way if you really think it needs more support. I really don't think it needs that much support. Like I said, that was just an extreme example of how to support it. I would recommend doing it the kind of like a little bit less, somewhere in between, because parts like that, they're really thin. They can warp, they can bend away a little bit from the supports because they're so thin. The material gets really malleable, and it gets really sloppy. So you wind up with warped parts because of it. So having enough supports and kind of like finding a balance between like I have enough versus I have, I don't have too many or I'm not going to destroy the print quality. That's a very difficult thing to do. So finding that balance is tricky. Anyway, I hope this that helped kind of shed some light on the way that I would do this kind of thing. This is the way I support little parts and accessory parts and stuff like jewelry and things like that. And if this helped you, great, awesome. Leave us a like. If you'd love to see other episodes or have other ideas or suggestions, maybe some things you'd like to learn, please leave it in the comment section below. We definitely want to hear from you as much as possible because that's how the channel grows. As always, thanks so much for watching. We appreciate you. Have a happy, and safe new year, and we'll see you all real soon.